Hi, everyone. Chapter 10. I have lots of videos and handouts on D12 for you guys to check out for this chapter. There are some calculations you need to know, and I do my best, of course, I did my best to kind of explain everything kind of step by step in those handouts and videos. So I'm not going to spend that much time talking about them in this video. I'm just going to talk about the kind of overall picture of this chapter, which is about pure competition. Remember, we talked about pure competition in chapter 3 when we talked about demand and supply. So if you don't remember demand and supply, definitely check out chapter 3, okay? Before we talk about perfect competition, let's talk about 4 different markets we have in microeconomics. We have pure competition. This chapter is all about pure competition. So after we briefly look at these 4 markets, we're going to talk about pure competition in more detail. We will talk about profit maximization, the shape of the demand. We'll see why it's important to talk about the demand in this market, and we'll see how businesses basically in this market can operate and maximize their profit in the short run. So we have 4 markets in macroeconomics. You need to know the characteristics of these markets. You need 2 examples that are associated with these 4 markets. We will talk about pure competition and monopoly in more detail in future chapters. We will talk about also oligopoly market kind of briefly in chapter 13, and you will see that even for that chapter, the only thing that I need for you guys to know is the characteristics of the market, and not that much of the profit maximization aspect of it. If you are an econ major, you will learn more about oligopoly market and even in monopolistic competition in your more kind of advanced microeconomics. But for those of you who are not econ majors, we are focused on pure competition and monopoly only in terms of profit maximization. We're not going to talk about monopolistic competition market in detail. And in chapter 13, if you see, that's the last chapter that we're going to cover in this class. But again, we're not going into detail in oligopoly market, okay? So let's look at the characteristics of these markets. You have to know them. You will get questions about them on the homework, on the final exam. But as I said, you also need to know about profit maximization in pure competition and monopoly. This table here, I love it. I got it from the textbook. It summarizes everything we need to know about these 4 markets. Let's just start with pure competition. Again, we will talk about pure competition in this market when we're done with characteristics of these markets. Pure competition, we had it in chapter 3, as I mentioned. It's a huge market. It's the biggest probably market we have in microeconomics. Getting into market is super duper easy. If you make money as a firm, you can stay. If you don't, you can leave the market easily. The products we have are all identical and very, very similar. Let's say you want milk. Milk is milk, right? So it's just the products in the market are very, very similar. There's nothing special about them. So that's why the customers are not really loyal to a specific brand in pure competition. They typically go with the cheapest product in the market, okay? All the buyers and sellers can change the price in the market, as we discussed in chapter 3. But remember that one buyer or one seller cannot impact the price. So we are saying that the sellers in the market and even the buyers, they are all price takers. They have to accept the price in the market. They do not have any control over the price. Most of the agricultural products that we know, they belong to this market. So in the examples, let's say for the test, if I say, okay, strawberry belongs to pure competition. Corn, that's pure competition. So agricultural products, they all in this category of pure competition. And the stock market is also pure competition, okay? Monopolistic competition, it's different from pure competition. In terms of the size of the market and the number of firms we have, It's still big, but it's not as big as pure competition. We have many firms in the market. Getting into the market compared to the pure competition is a little bit harder. All the clothing, shoes, they are all in monopolistic competition. Anything that is related to brands is monopolistic competition. So businesses spend billions of dollars building brands. Okay, so anything that any product that you associated with a brand is in this market. Okay, monopolistic competition. All right. Books, shoes, they're all monopolistic competition. All right. Compared to pure competition, definitely firms and businesses, they have control over their price. Their products are not similar like pure competition, obviously, and they try actually to spend thousands of money, billions of money, not, I shouldn't even say thousands, billions of dollars, proving that to their customers. And they actually run on their brands, okay? And they try to find loyal customers for themselves, okay? Oligopoly. Oligopoly is definitely smaller than monopolistic competition and pure competition. We have only few firms in oligopoly. They have definitely more control over the price because we have less number of firms here. Getting into the market is obviously more difficult compared to monopolistic competition and pure competition. You can have a differentiated product or you can find similar products. So that's why we have two different types of oligopoly. In terms of the products we have, all the cars or automobiles, oil and gas companies, still they are all in oligopoly, okay? What else? Cell phone companies, they are also in oligopoly market. So they obviously have good amount of control over their prices, okay? They still do lots of advertising, just like monopolistic competition. As I said, in monopolistic competition, the businesses spend billions of dollars building brands and advertising for their products. So advertisement is huge in monopolistic competition. It is still big in oligopoly. Pure competition, not much, okay? Then let's move on to monopoly. In monopoly, we have only 1 to 2 firms. I know it says 1, but sometimes you have even more than 1. But getting into this market is impossible. We'll see why in chapter 12. We have unique products. There is no close substitution for the products in monopoly. So they're definitely unique, like electricity, like gas, like water, cable companies. So the type of products that they offer is unique. They really don't need that much of advertisement to sell their products because people need those products anyways. But if they want to do some sort of advertising, it will be public relation. The companies we have in monopoly are typically government owned, or they get subsidies from the government, but we will learn more about monopoly in next chapter, okay, chapter 12. All right, now let's focus. So these are the things you need to know about these 4 markets. Examples, their characteristics, okay? Again, we're gonna talk about pure competition in this chapter, and then monopoly in the next chapter in more detail. Briefly, we will talk about oligopoly in chapter 13, and we're not actually gonna talk about monopolistic competition much. These are the things you need to know about monopolistic competition. Pure competition. So these are some of the important things that I already explained about pure competition. Let's talk about demand in pure competition because we want to talk about profit maximization. To talk about profit maximization, we need to know the shape of the demand in the market that we also learned in chapter 3, just kind of refresh our memories, and then the demand for one firm, because that is a big thing in this chapter. So we have a downward slope market demand, just like chapter 3. So we kind of have a typical shape for the demand in this market, but the demand for one firm in this market is not downward slope. Remember that our firms in this market are price takers, so the demand for one single firm is perfectly elastic. We have perfectly elastic in chapter 6. If you don't recall perfectly elastic, go back to chapter 6, elasticity and review. But if you recall from chapter 6, whenever we say that the demand is perfectly elastic, the demand is no longer downward slope. We have a horizontal demand. So demand for one firm is horizontal, but the demand for market, so if this is the market demand, MRP, that's my market. We have price, right? And we have Q, E. Our market is downward slope. The demand for market is downward slope. But the demand for one firm, I just write it here, one firm, and this is again P, and this is Q, E. Let me also add my supply here. The supply again is upward slope, just like chapter 3. So this is the equilibrium, right? This is the price. This is the equilibrium price. So this is my P star, right? Equilibrium price. One firm in this market is price taker, right? So they have to accept the price in the market. These are price takers. One firm cannot change this price on its own. So the demand for one firm is horizontal. One firm should accept the price in the market because it's a price taker. So the demand for one firm is not downward slope anymore. It's perfectly elastic. Makes sense? Hopefully it does. That's very important because when it comes to profit maximization, we're going to need that shape of demand. Now let's talk about profit. So profit is nothing but total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue is price times quantity. These are the things you need to know. You can, of course, write them down, have them handy when you read this chapter or when you take the test, but just know how to use them. That's my suggestion always to you guys. We also need to know marginal revenue. We had marginal values in the past, like marginal utility, marginal product in the previous chapters. Marginal revenue, again, is extra revenue, additional revenue from one more unit of output. How you calculate it? It's the change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. Another important thing we need to know for this chapter is average revenue. Average revenue is the revenue per unit of output. If you divide total revenue by quantity, you can get your average revenue, okay? And this is just a little example. You can do it on your own. It's pretty straightforward. But the point that I'm trying to make here is to show you the marginal revenue. In this chapter, definitely, guys, make sure to check out my other videos in this chapter. As I said, I explain everything in kind of more detail. In this chapter, in this market, in perfect competition market, an important thing is happening. First of all, our demand for one firm was perfectly elastic, and it's basically nothing but the price in the market, if you remember in the graph that I just drew. So the demand for one firm is nothing but the equilibrium price. Also, as you can see from this table here, our marginal revenue is always equal to the price in the market, okay? That's a very important thing to remember. Also, if you calculate the average revenue, you will see that the average revenue is also equal to our marginal revenue, our price. So that's a very important thing. In perfect competition, not in monopoly, not in oligopoly, not in monopolistic competition, only in pure competition, price is equal to marginal revenue is equal to average revenue. So for the test, if I ask you to calculate the profit and I don't give you the price, but you have information about marginal revenue, you need to know that price is the same as marginal revenue. So you can use the marginal revenue to calculate your profit, right? Because marginal revenue is the same as price. So don't forget that. Let's look at the graph. So the total revenue, as you can also see in this table, as we're producing more and more output, the total revenue is going up from $2 to $4, $6, and $8. Price is fixed, but since you're changing the quantity, your total revenue is going up. So your total revenue has an increasing function. That's why you have this shape for total revenue. As you produce more and more, your total revenue increases. But your marginal revenue is fixed. It doesn't matter how much basically your price is, your marginal revenue is equal to your average revenue is equal to your price and the demand for one firm. So that's the shape of the marginal revenue. Now let's see basically how we can pick the amount of output that businesses should produce, because we know that in this market our businesses cannot control the price. They are price takers, but it's important for them to pick the right amount of output, the right amount of quantity. Otherwise they are not able to achieve their goal, which is maximizing the profit. There are two different ways that businesses can pick their quantity in this market, and it depends on their profit. So basically, to pick the appropriate amount of quantity, we should see how the businesses can maximize their profit, okay? There are two different ways that businesses can maximize their profit. The first approach is called total revenue and total cost, and the second one is called marginal revenue and marginal cost. By the way, you need to know the formula for profit. Profit is total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue, don't forget, is price times quantity. And total cost, you know from a previous chapter, chapter 9, is total fixed cost plus total variable cost, right? So from these two approaches, you can get the optimal quantity that the businesses should produce in the short run in this market, okay? Both approaches will give you the exact same answer, okay? But we're just going to use two different ways to find that optimal quantity. Again, let me remind you, the businesses have no control over the price, but the key for them to survive in the short run in this market to pick the right amount of output. And they can find this amount of output using these two approaches, because if they use these two approaches, we can guarantee that businesses are going to maximize their profit in the short run, okay? And with that, we can find the optimal amount of output they should produce. Let's just start with the first approach, total revenue, total cost. So if you calculate total revenue, if you calculate your total cost, and then you calculate your profit, find the maximum profit, then you can find the optimal quantity that is giving you the maximum profit. Let me show you just quickly this table. And you can, of course, go over all these calculations we have here. Total cost is given. Even if it was not given, you can add total fixed cost and total variable cost to get your total cost. You definitely have some sort of information about your total cost when you solve these type of questions. The price is given at the top of the table. You can multiply the price by the quantity in the first column to get your total revenue, but pay attention to the last column, profit or loss. So your profit is total revenue minus total cost. This approach is all about finding your maximum profit. So you calculate your total revenue, you calculate your total cost, and then you basically use the formula total revenue minus total cost to calculate your profit or your loss. When you are done, look for the highest or the maximum profit that you have. Look at here. The maximum profit in this example is $2.99. from here, you can then find the optimal quantity that you were looking for, which is the 9 units of output, right? So that's all these approaches about. Finding the maximum profit. Remember, the goal here was to find the optimal Q. We are kind of moving backwards. We are first going to calculate the profit, then maximum profit, the highest profit among all these numbers we have. The 299 was the highest, and then you can find your optimal quantity that is associated with the highest profit you have, which is 299. Okay, so we found that quantity we were looking for. If the company in the short run produces 9 units of output, then that company, which is a price taker, can achieve the goal, which is maximizing the profit 299. Okay. Another way that again, check out my video for where we are explaining the sorry, I was distracted. Where I explained the graph for you, but kind of briefly, before I move on to the second approach, we have the total revenue, we have the total cost. The shape of total cost was explained in chapter 9. If you do not recall, definitely go back and review total cost shape. But if you remember, the total cost increases as we produce more and more. That's why we had kind of this shape for total cost. The longest distance between the total revenue and total cost will be the maximum profit, because the distance between TR and TC, total revenue and total cost, is our profit, right? So if you find the longest distance between these two, you can find the maximum profit, the 299 we had in that example. If you come down to the quantity axis, you can find the optimal Q, okay? Remember that businesses in the short run, they start actually with this loss, or all these negative numbers in the last column we have here, which is absolutely normal, because when you start your own business, your initial cost is pretty high. But you have to be patient, right? As you produce more and more output, look at the numbers we have in this table. The loss is getting smaller, and at some point, when we hit the break-even point, when the normal profit we defined in the previous chapters, then we can start making money. Our company will be profitable. And you can see all these positive numbers we have here, positive 53, positive 124, okay? And this diagram here is kind of explaining that. We have two break-even points, as you can see on the graph, excuse me, or the normal profit when TR is equal to TC. Remember, the break-even point, the normal profit, was when the economic profit was 0. TR minus TC was 0, or TR is equal to TC. Before the first break-even point, the company is not making any money. We have loss because total cost is going to be greater than total revenue. You can also see it here in the table. Total cost is 100, let's say, for the 0 amount of output, and revenue is 0. For the first unit of output, the total cost is 190 and the total revenue is 131. So the total cost at the beginning is higher than total revenue. So before the first break-even point, and I'm talking about this point here, the profit doesn't exist. But as soon as we hit the first break-even point, look, then after the first break-even point, company is making money because the total cost will drop, total revenue starts to grow, so we have more profit. After this point, after this quantity, after this 9 quantity we have here, company is still making money. If we produce more, since we still have, look at here, since we still have this area, which is the distance between TR and TC, we are still making money. The company is still seeing those positive numbers, but look at the distance between TR and TC. It's getting smaller and smaller. And if you also go back to the table, you can see however the profit is positive, the numbers are positive, but the profit is going down, right? It's because we are producing too much output. Our cost is just going to go up, right? So before we hit the second break-even point, this point here, we have to stop. We have to stop making more output, because if we hit the second break-even point and produce more output, we are in danger. We are going to lose lots and lots of money. Okay, so the optimal amount of output that this company should produce is just 9. We should not go beyond 9 units of output. However, we're going to make money, but since our cost is going to go up after this point, after 9 units of output, we are going to lose money. And remember, this is short run, so we really don't have that much time to make mistakes. Otherwise, we're going to lose our business. Okay, so that was the first approach. Now, let's look at the second approach. The second approach is called marginal revenue, marginal cost. The result, again, from this approach will be very similar to total revenue, total cost. Look at the example. The example is we're using the same numbers we had in the previous table. I didn't copy all the information, so when you study this part, definitely keep the first table in front of you when you are doing the second table. I would say print it out, or I don't know, look at the textbook, because you also have it in the textbook online. If you want to understand this, the second approach, using the numbers basically that I'm about to show you, okay? So we can either find the optimal quantity using total revenue, total cost approach that we just discussed, or the second approach, marginal revenue, marginal cost approach, okay? And again, remember, we moved backwards for total revenue, total cost. First, we calculated the profit, we found the maximum profit, then from there we found the quantity that is associated with this maximum profit. That quantity was the optimal quantity that we should produce, okay? Because the firms in this market cannot control the price, so the only thing that they can choose is quantity. They have to be careful with how much they are going to produce, otherwise they're not going to make any profit, right? Marginal revenue, marginal cost is easy to remember. We have this kind of marginal revenue, marginal cost rule that it tells us whenever the marginal revenue is equal or very close to marginal cost, then our profit is maximum, and again, our quantity is going to be optimal. Okay, so for the second approach, first, you should calculate marginal revenue. Marginal revenue was the extra revenue for extra unit of output. It's the change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. Then you have to calculate marginal cost. Marginal cost is the additional cost of producing one more unit of output. We had it in the previous chapter, and it's the change in total cost divided by change in quantity. Okay, so for this approach, you should know the marginal revenue, you should calculate the marginal cost, okay? Whenever they are equal or very close, then the profit at that point is maximum, then you can find your optimal quantity. And you will see in this example, they are not exactly the same, but they're very close, okay? So you have the total cost, you have the average total cost in this example. But again, you can go back to the first table we had for the total revenue, total cost approach to bring all this information. I just put it here to kind of remind you something. When you want to calculate your marginal cost, you cannot, I'm repeating, you cannot use column 4. Column 4 is the average total cost. I just wanted to kind of remind you here. You cannot use average total cost when you calculate your marginal cost. You need to have total cost, because marginal cost is changing total cost divided by changing quantity. How are you going to find it if you didn't have the previous table from the first approach? You should multiply your average total cost by quantity. If you multiply ATC by Q, you can get your TC. And you should do it for all the numbers in this chapter, in this column, okay? Then you can use that to calculate your marginal cost. How we're going to calculate marginal revenue? We calculate the total revenue in the first table for total revenue, total cost. We're going to use that to calculate marginal revenue. It will be the change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. And we typically leave the first one when the quantity is 0, first marginal cost, marginal revenue blank. As you can see here, even for average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, we left the first row blank because they just don't exist when quantity is 0, okay? Important thing to remember for marginal revenue is that our marginal revenue in this market is the same as price, same as average revenue. So if you want to go back to the previous table that we had, you will see that for every unit of for every unit of quantity, the marginal revenue is 131, 131, 131. Can you see it here? Because again, we found this important fact in perfect competition that price is the same as marginal revenue, same as average revenue. So even if you don't want to look at the table, since you had the price at the top of the table, you could tell, okay, marginal revenue is 131 no matter what, no matter how much we produce, right? Now, let's look at the column 5 and column 6. We are talking about marginal revenue, marginal cost approach. So we should find a place where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And it's happening, or they're very close, and it's happening again, oopsie, when the profit is $2.99. That was the maximum profit, right? From the first table, from the first approach. And again, when marginal cost is 130 and marginal revenue is 131, look, the quantity is 9. So we found the optimal quantity of 9 using marginal revenue, marginal cost approach and total revenue, total cost approach. So both approaches are giving us the same answer, okay? So no matter which approach you use, you should be able to find the optimal Q, okay? Let's look at the graph. The marginal revenue equals marginal price. We know that the demand for one firm is horizontal because it's perfectly elastic. Since this approach is about marginal revenue and marginal cost, we should add the marginal cost. And since we want to show the profit on the graph, just like the previous graph we had, which was super duper important, we need to add our average total cost. So this is the marginal cost, the U-shaped marginal cost we had in the previous chapter, right? The intersection of marginal revenue, marginal cost is where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, right? We need that point because we want to come all the way down to the quantity axis, to the output axis to find the optimal quantity, right? Which in this example is 9. So the total revenue is what? Is 131 times 9, right? Price times quantity. Now let's find the cost. For cost, we need to have the average total cost. Because if you multiply the average total cost by 9, which is the optimal quantity, you can get your total cost, right? Because we want to find profit here. But we are basically combining the two approaches here, guys, to show the profit, to find the profit. We use the second approach, marginal revenue, marginal cost, to find the 9 units of output, which was the optimal Q. Now we're going to use the total revenue and total cost to find the profit on the graph. The total revenue was 131 times 9. And for average, for the total cost, you should multiply the average total cost, which is about, I should go back to the table to find the exact number, but it's a kind of a little bit less than 100. And you should multiply that by 9. That will be your total cost, okay? Profit is total revenue minus total cost, right? So our profit is the shaded area, the green shaded area, because that's the TR minus TC. Watch the video that I explained this graph in more detail, okay? I'm going to change something in the next slide, because when it comes to profit maximization in pure competition, we have a very important topic, which is called shutdown case, okay? So here, guys, we have positive profit, right? Because our TR was greater than our TC, so no problem. Now, let's compare it with this graph. I reduced the price. The price here was 131, right? Now we're reducing the price to 71. Price is the same as marginal revenue, same as average revenue. Let's add marginal cost because we want to find the optimal quantity. The intersection of marginal revenue, marginal cost is where they are equal, right? Sorry, is where the quantity is optimal. I'm going to add, which is for this example is, let's say 5, okay? Of course, there are two different quantities that you can pick, 5 and 2, because both of them are going to give you the marginal revenue equals marginal cost, okay? I have a better example if you check out the videos on D12 for this part actually. And let's add the average total cost because we need the average total cost, right, to find the profit, which does not exist in this example, right? So the total revenue, guys, is $71, let's say, times 5, okay? But look at the average total cost. Our average total cost here is above marginal revenue. Our average variable cost is also, above the marginal cost. If you compare it with the previous graph we had, our average variable cost was below the marginal revenue. So big conclusion here, anytime that the price or the marginal revenue are less than average variable cost, we don't have any profit. To have a positive profit, your price should be above the average variable cost, okay? So in this example, since the total cost is greater than total revenue, we do not have any profit, right? But we're not done. We are not done. Every time that a business is not making money, since it's a short run, they have to ask themselves, should I keep producing the optimal amount of output, or should I take a little break and shut down? Remember from the first example, the first table we had some negative numbers at the beginning. And then we hit the first break-even point, and then the company started making money. So the question is, okay, I'm not making money in this example. I'm not having any positive numbers here for my profit. Should I stop or should I keep producing? The answer depends on this shutdown analysis that we're going to do. And again, I have a separate video on shutdown case. Definitely watch it. I'm not going into detail here because it's easier for me to write everything down and show you step by step, which I did in that video. But let me tell you briefly. Whenever you want to decide if you should shut down or not, you are going to compare the loss with the fixed cost, okay? When you shut down and take a little break, what does it mean? It means that you're not going to produce any output, but you want to stay in business. So you have to pay your mortgage. You have to pay the insurance. You have to pay the rent. So these are all your fixed costs. So you are taking a little break. You are not producing anything, but you are still paying your fixed costs, okay? So the decision that you should close or not for a short period of time depends on your loss and your fixed cost. If your loss is greater than your fixed cost, so you should definitely shut down, take a little break, just pay the fixed cost. If the things in the market, especially the price changes, then you can probably go back to business, start producing more output. If, however, your fixed cost is greater than your loss, then you are not going to shut down. You are going to produce the same amount of output, the same optimal amount of output, because shutting down is just too expensive for them. For you, the fixed cost will be much bigger than your loss. So it's better if you bear the loss and keep producing. Hopefully things will change in your favor in the future. Okay, so remember, whenever you are not making money, whenever your numbers are negative, you are going to ask yourself, because it's short run, should I produce more output, or should I take a little break and shut down and just pay the fixed cost? Okay, so we are not going to have the fixed cost in the monopoly market. This is the only time we're going to talk about fixed cost. Remember, the shutdown case is very, very important for businesses in the short run in perfect competition. So hope this video was helpful. I'll see you next time.